In the shadowed age between mushroom clouds and Red Scare paranoia, the Cold War wasn't just fought in boardrooms or missile silos. It unfolded in flickering reels of celluloid. These weren't superhero tales. They were quiet, coded wars told through trembling hands, double lives, and secrets buried behind iron curtains. But 15 forgotten spy thrillers didn't just mirror their era. They defined its fear, precision, and betrayal. Number 15, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, 1965. When The Spy Who Came In From the Cold premiered, critics called it the anti-James Bond. Grim, cold, and stripped of glamour, it became the mirror opposite of espionage fantasy. Based on John le Carré's breakout novel, it dared to expose the gray moral world of intelligence, where loyalty meant nothing and everyone was expendable. The story followed British agent Alec Leamis, played by Richard Burton, sent to pose as a defector to East Germany. But the twist? The mission itself was a lie. Leamis was the bait, a pawn sacrificed in a cynical game between bureaucrats. The film was controversial for its time. Western intelligence agencies reportedly hated it. It revealed too much of their psychological tactics: disinformation, staged betrayals, moral corrosion. In the U.S., the CIA allegedly discouraged screenings on military bases, fearing it would demoralize officers during the Vietnam escalation. Production wasn't smooth either. Burton's heavy drinking led to tension on set, and Le Carré himself clashed with Paramount executives who wanted to lighten the tone. The film's uncompromising bleakness, however, became its strength. It swept critical awards, even earning an Academy Award nomination. Yet, as the Cold War intensified, it was quietly buried under glossier spy blockbusters. Decades later, historians recognized it as the truest film about espionage ever made, one that stripped away illusion and left only the cost of serving shadows. Number 14. The Quiller Memorandum, 1966. In a sea of Bond clones, the Quiller Memorandum stood out, not for its explosions, but for its silence. This British-West German production captured espionage as a chess match of wits, not weapons. George Siegel starred as Quiller, an American agent sent to West Berlin to dismantle a neo-Nazi organization. But nothing and no one was what it seemed. Its release came amid real-world revelations of ex-Nazi officials still holding power in Europe. That made its premise dangerous. In West Germany, some politicians called it insulting propaganda, and screenings were canceled in conservative districts. British censors nearly delayed its release after diplomatic pressure. The film had named real Berlin districts associated with Cold War informant networks. Behind the scenes, tensions ran high. Director Michael Anderson wanted realism. The studio wanted action. The compromise was atmospheric. Minimalism, stark lighting, whispering dialogue, and an eerie score by John Barry. Critics were divided. Some called it brilliant. Others said it was too cerebral. For audiences, it was unsettling. An espionage film where every smile might hide betrayal. Time magazine called it a spy story that refuses to entertain. And yet, in hindsight, that was the point. It wasn't designed to thrill. It was meant to expose. Today, the Quiller Memorandum is remembered as a haunting artifact, one that revealed the Cold War's quieter cruelty, the loneliness of knowing that even your mission might be a lie. Number 13. Funeral in Berlin, 1966. Before The Spy Who Came In From the Cold became shorthand for disillusionment, Funeral in Berlin proved that cynicism could be stylish. Michael Caine returned as Harry Palmer, the sardonic anti-hero from the Ipcress file, in this sequel drenched in smoke, suspicion, and gray East-West politics. The premise was deceptively simple. A KGB colonel wanted to defect, and Palmer had to arrange the deal. But beneath that, the movie unraveled a web of manipulation involving the British, Russians, and Israelis. Everyone was spying on everyone. And Palmer was the disposable middleman. It was shot on location in Berlin, where the real wall loomed like a scar. East German guards often watched the filming through binoculars. One crew member later claimed Soviet agents followed them, thinking the movie might be a cover for real intelligence work. Censorship arrived subtly. Some countries, including Poland and Czechoslovakia, banned it outright. accusing it of anti-socialist slander. In Britain, MI6 reportedly reviewed the script before production, though officially they denied involvement. Critics adored its gritty humor and moral ambiguity, and Michael Caine's portrayal became an enduring symbol of weary Cold War realism. Unlike Bond's world of champagne and tuxedos, Palmer bought cheap groceries and distrusted everyone. When it faded from theaters, it left behind a shadow, a reminder that real espionage wasn't glamorous. It was transactional, lonely, and lethal. Funeral in Berlin remains a funeral for idealism, the kind only the Cold War could bury. Number 12. The Kremlin Letter, 1970. When the Kremlin Letter arrived, it baffled audiences and enraged critics. Directed by John Huston, the man behind The Maltese Falcon, it was a Cold War labyrinth so intricate that even spies might have needed a map. Initially dismissed as too confusing, it later earned cult reverence for being too honest. The film begins with an aging intelligence officer recruiting a team of outcasts to retrieve a stolen letter that could start World War III. But what starts as a classic spy retrieval spirals into moral collapse. Betrayal isn't just a plot twist here. It's the oxygen everyone breathes. Huston crafted it as an indictment of Western espionage hypocrisy. It suggested that America's spy agencies were no less ruthless than their Soviet counterparts, a dangerous idea in 1970. Some American distributors reportedly pulled early screenings after CIA veterans complained about its portrayal of rogue operations. Production was equally chaotic. Huston's perfectionism clashed with studio executives who wanted a faster, more glamorous edit. Actors like Patrick O'Neill and Orson Welles found themselves delivering dialogue heavy with cryptic doublespeak, exactly how real intelligence briefings sounded. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Pauline Kael called it the most heartless film ever made. But years later, scholars saw it differently, as one of the few spy films that dared to strip away patriotism entirely. By the time the credits rolled, everyone was dead or damned. And the letter, symbolic of truth, was meaningless. The Kremlin Letter wasn't a movie that thrilled you. It haunted you. It whispered what the Cold War tried to hide. In espionage, there are no heroes, only survivors pretending to believe. Number 11. The Deadly Affair, 1967. If color is emotion, The Deadly Affair was drained of both. Sidney Lumet's adaptation of John le Carré's Call for the Dead painted London in washed-out sepia tones, as if hope itself had been classified. Released in 1967, it starred James Mason as Charles Dobbs, a weary spy investigating a supposed suicide, one that leads straight into Cold War corruption. At first glance, it was an elegant, slow-burn thriller, but beneath the civility lay Lumet's fury at political deceit. The film implied that both British intelligence and its American allies were complicit in moral decay. Censors in several European countries found its depiction of Western duplicity unpatriotic. In Chile and South Africa, it was temporarily pulled from distribution for subversive undertones. Behind the scenes, Lumet fought Columbia Pictures over creative control. The studio wanted action. Lumet wanted despair. His compromise? A film that looked emotionally dead, an aesthetic achieved by desaturating the color negative through a rare flashing technique. Audiences didn't flock to it, but critics admired its subtlety. Mason's tired eyes told an entire nation's story, a Britain losing faith in its post-war righteousness. Years later, the film gained new respect when declassified MI5 documents revealed similar suicides tied to intelligence leaks. In hindsight, The Deadly Affair had predicted reality, that in a war of secrets, the truth often dies quietly in an apartment, with no one left to care. Number 10. The Macintosh Man, 1973. By the early 70s, the spy genre had become spectacle. But The Macintosh Man, again directed by John Huston, was something else. A stripped-down, cynical thriller about deception disguised as justice. Paul. Newman starred as Joseph Reardon, a British agent posing as a jewel thief to infiltrate a Soviet spy ring. What unfolds is less an action movie than a bureaucratic nightmare. Betrayed by his own side, Reardon realizes that his entire mission and imprisonment was orchestrated to protect corrupt power within the British government itself. Its premise echoed real headlines. Around that time, several British double agents, including Kim Philby, had defected to Moscow. The Macintosh Man channeled that disillusionment directly, showing how institutions devour their own. Though filmed in Ireland and Malta, the movie faced protests from pro-Soviet groups claiming it vilified political prisoners. Meanwhile, British intelligence reportedly asked Warner Brothers to remove scenes showing real debriefing procedures. Behind the curtain, Huston and Newman clashed fiercely. Huston wanted a bleak parable. Newman wanted a taut thriller. The resulting hybrid confused critics but fascinated historians. Its cynical tone foreshadowed the coming era of Watergate and public distrust. When it faded from cinemas, it left behind a bitter legacy. A spy film not about victory, but futility. Every side lies, every agent is expendable, and freedom is just another word for plausible deniability. In its quiet final shot, Reardon walking away, expression blank, Huston seemed to tell us the Cold War's most terrifying truth. The real enemy wasn't communism or capitalism. It was the system itself. Number 9. The Looking Glass War, 1969. When The Looking Glass War hit cinemas, audiences expecting another spy thriller were instead handed a slow-motion tragedy. Based on another John le Carré novel, it was a brutal deconstruction of espionage fantasies, a story where incompetence, arrogance, and illusion destroyed lives as efficiently as bullets. The film opens with a washed-up British intelligence agency, underfunded, overconfident, sending a young, inexperienced agent across the Iron Curtain to photograph Soviet missile installations. Played by Christopher Jones, the agent embodies naive patriotism. He's handsome, brave, and doomed from the first frame. The operation collapses almost immediately, revealing that his handlers never expected him to survive. Released amid real-world British spy scandals, the film's timing was incendiary. The Cambridge Five had recently humiliated MI6, and suddenly here was a movie that mocked the same bureaucracy's vanity and failure. British intelligence circles reportedly despised it. Some theaters near military bases refused to show it after quiet advice from officials. Behind the scenes, Le Carré clashed with studio executives who wanted more glamour. Director Frank Pearson, fresh off Cool Hand Luke, insisted on bleak realism instead. He filmed in freezing conditions along the German border, using locals as extras, some of whom were rumored to be genuine informants. Critics were polarized. Younger viewers saw it as an anti-war allegory, while older audiences found it cynical. Yet, over time, the film became prophetic. It captured the exhaustion of an empire that no longer believed in its own myths. By its haunting final scene, a corpse lying nameless in the snow, the Looking Glass War had made its point. Espionage wasn't about saving nations. It was about sacrificing individuals for the illusion that nations still mattered. Number 8. The Odessa File, 1974. The Odessa File wasn't a typical Cold War spy film. It was a revenge story that burned with historical guilt. Directed by Ronald Neame and based on Frederick Forsyth's novel, it followed a German journalist who uncovers a secret post-war network of ex-SS officers, the Odessa, protecting war criminals and manipulating Cold War politics from the shadows. At its release, the film was explosive. West German politicians publicly condemned it, arguing it exaggerated Nazi survival conspiracies. But the real controversy came when investigative journalists discovered that certain details in the film, names, locations, even bank accounts, were uncannily accurate. Some suspected Forsyth had received information from real intelligence agents. John Voight starred as Peter Miller, a reporter whose personal quest for justice becomes a moral descent. His search leads him into a secret world where the past hasn't died. It's simply changed uniforms. The film's haunting sequences in Hamburg and Vienna were shot in actual wartime locations, which gave the story a chilling authenticity. Censors in several European countries debated cuts, fearing it would reignite anti-Nazi resentment or harm diplomatic relations. The CIA reportedly praised it for educational value, while Eastern Bloc critics denounced it as Western propaganda. Behind the scenes, Neame faced death threats from neo-fascist sympathizers. Production had to relocate twice after bomb threats. Yet, against all odds, the the Odessa File became a success, both commercially and morally. Its legacy lies not in its thrills, but in its courage to suggest that the Cold War's secret alliances weren't only ideological, they were historical. In its final image, Miller walks away alone, burdened with truth and powerless to change it. That silence became the Cold War's defining sound. Number 7. 3 Days of the Condor, 1975. By the mid-70s, the Cold War had turned inward. America no longer feared Moscow. It feared itself. Sidney Pollack's 3 Days of the Condor captured that paranoia perfectly. It was sleek, stylish, and deeply unsettling. The first mainstream spy thriller to suggest that the CIA's greatest enemy might be the CIA. Robert Redford plays Joe Turner, a low-level researcher who reads spy novels for a living, until his entire office is massacred by hired assassins. Suddenly, he's on the run, hunted by his own agency, uncovering a plot involving oil, power, and political assassination. It wasn't just fiction. Pollack and screenwriter Lorenzo Semple Jr. drew inspiration from real-world scandals, the CIA's secret coups, the Watergate fallout, and rumors of rogue operations buried deep within Langley. When the film released, the U.S. Senate was conducting the Church Committee hearings, public investigations into illegal intelligence activities. The timing was explosive. Government officials publicly downplayed it as entertainment, but insiders whispered that the story hit too close to classified truth. Pollack later revealed that former agents contacted him privately, warning that some plot details were dangerously accurate. Behind the camera, Pollack fought to keep the film's political edge intact. Paramount executives wanted a romance. Pollack insisted on existential terror. The result was a thriller that looked like a chase movie but felt like a moral inquest. Audiences loved it, yet left theaters uneasy. The film's ending, where Turner confronts the CIA in front of the New York Times, wasn't a victory. It was a question. What if truth no longer matters because the system can always deny it? Decades later, 3 Days of the Condor still defines post-Watergate paranoia. The moment America realized that the Cold War enemy might already be in the mirror. Number 6. The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. Before you roll your eyes, yes, it's a Bond film. But among the camp and charm, The Spy Who Loved Me quietly embodied the late Cold War's strange contradictions. Rivalry laced with cooperation. Danger dressed as diplomacy. It wasn't just another gadget-fueled fantasy. It was the rare blockbuster where East and West had to work together to survive. Released in 1977, Roger Moore's third outing as R007 began with a shocking premise. British and Soviet submarines carrying nuclear warheads mysteriously vanish. MI6 and the KGB, bitter enemies, are forced to form an uneasy alliance to stop a megalomaniac named Stromberg, who plans to trigger nuclear war and rebuild civilization under the sea. Behind the glitz, the film was a reflection of détente, the brief thaw between the superpowers. Moore's Bond teams up with Soviet agent Anya Amasova, played by Barbara Bach, forming cinema's most symbolic Cold War handshake. Yet even this alliance trembles under the memory of mutual betrayal. Controversy followed. In Moscow, it was banned for promoting capitalist superiority. In the U.S., critics accused it of romanticizing the enemy. And during production, the British government quietly intervened when certain submarine sequences risked revealing classified naval design details. Production chaos almost sank it, literally. Director Lewis Gilbert's massive soundstage set for Stromberg's Ocean Lair became the largest in film history, nearly bankrupting the studio. Yet, against odds, it became one of the most beloved entries in the Bond saga. Its legacy? Beneath the glamour and gadgets lay a message that even spies shaped by hatred could glimpse humanity. The Cold War, for once, blinked, and Hollywood immortalized that fleeting moment of fragile peace. Number 5. The Osterman Weekend, 1983. Sam Peckinpah's final film, The Osterman Weekend, was a paranoid fever dream wrapped in the language of surveillance. Based on Robert Ludlum's novel, it asked the most terrifying Cold War question of all. What if the propaganda machine wasn't just watching us, but manufacturing us? Rutger Hauer starred as John Tanner, a television journalist invited to a mysterious weekend retreat by an intelligence operative. Tanner is told his closest friends are Soviet spies, but as the weekend spirals, he realizes the entire event is being filmed, part of a psychological operation to manipulate his perception of truth. Released in the early 80s, amid Reagan-era tension and the resurgence of espionage propaganda, the film hit too close to home. Networks allegedly balked at its portrayal of media complicity in intelligence operations. Some European broadcasters refused to air its trailer, citing anti-American subtext. Behind the camera, chaos reigned. Peckinpah was gravely ill and addicted to medication, clashing with producers and rewriting scenes daily. Crew members described a set as paranoid as the movie itself. Yet, despite the turmoil, Peckinpah's vision endured, a world where surveillance was both punishment and entertainment. Critics dismissed it as messy, but later generations saw it as prophetic. It anticipated the media-saturated politics of the 21st century, where manipulation replaced espionage, and truth was just another broadcast. In the film's haunting finale, Tanner destroys the surveillance feeds, symbolically blinding the state. But at what cost? The Cold War had always been about control, and the Osterman weekend dared to suggest that we had already surrendered to it, long before the first satellite blinked above us. Number 4. The Fourth Protocol, 1987. By the late 80s, the Cold War was fraying, but the Fourth Protocol showed it could still turn deadly in an instant. Based on Frederick Forsyth's best-selling novel, this British thriller stripped away glamour and delivered pure procedural paranoia. Michael Caine starred as British counterintelligence officer John Preston, who uncovers a Soviet plot to detonate a nuclear bomb near an American airbase in Britain, making it look like a NATO accident to shatter the Western alliance. Pierce Brosnan, in one of his darkest roles, played the Soviet agent sent to execute the plan with chilling precision. Released in 1987, the film was almost banned in Finland and Denmark due to fears it could aggravate East-West relations. Soviet. Newspapers labeled it war hysteria, while Forsyth himself revealed he had drawn details from real defectors' accounts of Soviet false flag operations. Behind the scenes, MI5 reportedly requested changes to certain weapon handling sequences that too closely resembled real British nuclear procedures. Forsyth refused. "If they're nervous," he said, "then I've done my job." Production was beset with secrecy. Some ex-intelligence consultants on set refused to have their names in the credits. The tone was chillingly authentic, and that authenticity made it unforgettable. The Fourth Protocol was more than fiction. It was a warning. It reminded audiences that the Cold War's most terrifying weapon wasn't the bomb. It was plausibility. The idea that an entire nation could be framed into oblivion with one perfect lie. Its final shot, a brief handshake between enemies who've learned nothing, remains one of the most quietly devastating endings in spy cinema. Number 3. The Hunt for Red, October, 1990. Though technically arriving as the Cold War drew its final breath, The Hunt for Red October distilled everything the era stood for: mistrust, brinkmanship, and men trapped between loyalty and annihilation. Directed by John McTiernan and based on Tom Clancy's novel, it was the last great Cold War epic before the wall came down. Sean Connery plays Captain Marco Ramius, a Soviet submarine commander who defects with the USSR's most advanced nuclear sub, the Red October. His motive? A rebellion not against his country, but against a system built on paranoia. Opposite him, Alec Baldwin's Jack Ryan races to prove that Ramius isn't launching an attack, but fleeing tyranny. The U.S. Navy cooperated during production, at least officially. Yet, behind the scenes, Pentagon officials quietly restricted access to certain submarine systems after realizing how accurately the film portrayed sonar operations and nuclear launch safety procedures. Even more startling, the story's central concept, a silent, magnetohydrodynamic caterpillar drive, was based on a classified Soviet prototype. Soviet diplomats denounced the film as dangerously seductive, claiming it romanticized treason. But Western audiences saw something deeper: humanity cracking through decades of ideological ice. Critics called it intelligent adrenaline, audiences called it thrilling, but history called it symbolic, a final Cold War parable where understanding replaced annihilation. In its closing moments, as Ramius steers his stolen submarine toward an American sunrise, the message is clear. The greatest victory of the Cold War wasn't destruction. It was defection from hatred itself. Number 2. The Manchurian Candidate, 1962. Before JFK's assassination, before Watergate, there was The Manchurian Candidate, a film so incendiary it was pulled from theaters for over a decade. Directed by John Frankenheimer and starring Frank Sinatra, it was the first mainstream movie to suggest that brainwashing, assassination, and psychological control could all serve political ambition, not ideology. The story follows Sergeant Raymond Shaw, a decorated war hero secretly programmed by communist captors to become an assassin triggered by a playing card. His mother, chillingly portrayed by Angela Lansbury, is part of a right-wing conspiracy to seize the White House. When it premiered, it was hailed as brilliant, then almost immediately suppressed. After JFK's assassination in 1963, United Artists withdrew the film, fearing eerie parallels between fiction and national trauma. Conspiracy theorists whispered that intelligence agencies pressured them to keep it buried. Behind the scenes, rumors swirled. Sinatra, who had White House ties, allegedly faced political warnings. Frankenheimer's direction was so realistic that CIA officials reportedly questioned how he knew about conditioning techniques used during the Korean War. When it was re-released in 1988, audiences saw it differently, not as propaganda, but prophecy. It predicted the weaponization of media, psychology, and fear. Its influence can be traced through decades of political thrillers that followed, from The Parallax View to JFK and beyond. The Manchurian Candidate wasn't just a Cold War movie, it was the Cold War's fever dream, one that never truly ended. Number 1. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, 1979. Forget explosions, forget chase scenes. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the BBC's 7-part adaptation of John le Carré's masterpiece, was the Cold War at its purest, a war fought in whispers, teacups, and coded glances. Alec Guinness, as the weary George Smiley, hunts a Soviet mole embedded at the top of British intelligence. There are no gadgets, no gunfights, only suspicion layered upon suspicion. Every conversation could be betrayal. Every silence could be a confession. Broadcast in 1979, it arrived at a time when Britain was losing faith in its institutions. Viewers were riveted and terrified by how real it felt. Le Carré, himself a former MI6 officer, used real espionage terminology, real methods, and even rumors from the still-active Cambridge 5 investigation. MI5 reportedly requested early access to the scripts, worried the series might expose operational secrets. Le Carré refused. "It's not about secrets," he said. "It's about lies." The BBC's limited budget became its strength. No spectacle, only truth. Guinness's restrained performance won international acclaim, and even Soviet officials privately admitted admiration. It was banned across Eastern Europe, where state broadcasters feared citizens might sympathize with its theme of moral decay. Decades later, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy remains the definitive Cold War narrative, one where the battlefield isn't geography, but conscience. Its lesson endures. The greatest spies weren't fighting for truth. They were fighting to remember what truth once meant. 15 forgotten Cold War thrillers, each a mirror reflecting an age where loyalty was currency and trust could kill. Together, they tell the story of a world that believed silence was safety and deception was peace. But what happens when the lies outlive the war? Which of these shadowy classics still chills you today? Subscribe and keep watching the truth.